Because Tanya's right. We met a man the other day, a very bright man, who cares passionately about Aboriginal people and said to us with great passion, I would love to see us strike a great blow here, but by the way, I support almost no change. Now, he's not an enemy, he's an ally, and yet his points could be used by those who are opposed for the wrong reasons, if you get what I'm saying. So it's very difficult.
All right, last two questions. Gentleman here and the lady up the back.
Thank you for the time. I too have been involved with those that were behind the 67 referendum over time. And for me, it hasn't adequately been explained yet whether or not these issues were canvassed then. If so, why they weren't part of the proposals that were put forward. And if not, how what's afoot now is a natural progression from those changes that came in 1967. I'm gratified that the group are very sensitised to the dangers involved here. I believe that the goodwill in Australia that was evident in 67 isn't there now, which will involve some extra work. And I think an explanation as to why what's proposed now is a progression from 67 is an important ingredient in that. As for strategies forward, I wonder whether you've got a plan afoot to visit New York and the other media moguls before you even issue public awareness material. Thank you.
Just very quickly, in terms of a trip to New York, no. What we want to hear from is all Australians and Indigenous Australians to get their views before we complete our report. That next stage, certainly in New York, might be something that John and Tanya has in mind. But I'll just take a quick short answer from a panel member. Short answer.
There's a lot of mythology about what 67 was what 67 actually did, and what it meant. It meant a lot more than what it actually did. 67 was essentially about acknowledging our Aboriginal brothers and sisters in the Constitution and giving the federal government a power to legislate in respect of them. What we're talking about now is how we legislate and about removing the last vestiges of racism from our Constitution. It's a big step forward.
Shane,
thanks. There's two very valuable suggestions in that which we can think about in our little panel.
Yeah, well, and builds on the proposals that we recommended, for example, as options in interim report, would build on the 67. The 67 gave the Commonwealth the power to deal with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, peace, order and good government. Section 51A has preamble that deals with respect, acknowledgement and recognition, and then builds on that with an option, with a variety of different options. I think there was 5 of them we put in, to consider a non-discrimination provision as well, and protection in relation to inadvertent legal consequences in relation to native title in terms of a catch-all special purpose provision, for example, in subsection 2 of section 116 capital A of the expert panel's recommendation.
Right, the young lady at the back, and then I'll finish with a closing statement from Fred Chaney and no more after that, because you can look at the panel members and talk to them and ask questions of any of them.
I appreciate John's comment about rising above politics. However, how will the panel deal with what could potentially be seen as a whitewash, or the government itself shooting itself in the foot in regard to its best intentions here, when the intervention still continues, funding's pulled out of Aboriginal languages, and the report that we've just had a look at this week from Twiggy Forest tells us that punitive action is the best action, that positions children as oppressed somewhere on a crossroads between the state and family. Those messages are really powerful in the community. How does the message the panel's trying to get across about inclusion override those very powerful alternative messages?
John, I'll let you lead on that. Oh, sorry, Tanya.
I mean, even the recognised movement, with, regardless of review panel or any other hat, we're hearing those sorts of things all the time, and people are concerned that it's going to drive support away. I think it's absolutely true that it chips away at goodwill amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and it raises a number of concerns. But changing the constitution is a very discrete task in many respects, and I think our campaign can be very vulnerable if those other issues aren't being discussed, and so we always point people to the experts in those areas. I think one of the things about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs is that every person or every organisation is expected to have a well-educated and well-informed comment or direction or instruction to give across the board. So we're focusing on this, and we work in partnership with advocates, Aboriginal advocates, who are constantly working on those things that you just raised. And so our position has to be, this is not neither or. And if we wait for the landscape to be perfect before we decide to pick this up, then I'm not sure we'll ever get there. And I think it does go back to the earlier comment. It's not that we're not paying attention to those other conversations because we know that they're very loud and very strong in some parts, but we really trust in the advocates that have always steered us through that stuff, and they'll keep doing it. But they're also people that are supporting this campaign. I mean, obviously, if some of those things weren't happening, they'd probably have more time to help us out, and that'd be awesome. But the reality is that we're really focused on the piece of work that we have to do, and we can't do this without political support. We can't do it without multi-party consensus. But let's not think that this is a government-run campaign, because it's not. We're trying to build a grassroots movement here, and there are currently, this time last year we had about 114,000 supporters. This year we've got over 212,000, and a lot of those are Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. And as Nova said before, we're expecting everyone to carry some of the workload here. So it's not like we're not paying attention to those other conversations, but our job is to focus on this, and we all need to put some time into this.
Just to add to that, the politicians and governments and their laws come and go, okay? But the Constitution, the dry, dusty, but incredibly important rule book that is the bedrock of our laws, does not come and go and change. It only changes when the Australian people change it. So it has a permanency and a stability. It is a bedrock that, in a sense, I think it's terribly important that we do everything we can to separate out, as Tanya has said, this bedrock issue and its document, or the document that supports it, or doesn't support it, depending on how we go, from the issues of the day, no matter how controversial or difficult they might be.
Fred, last comment, and then we need, because
just
we've
want to follow
encroached
up
into
on
Warren's time.
On Bob Beedman's point. The 67 referendum was an entirely different kettle of fish. The 67 referendum might have talked about the census and being counted, it might have talked about Commonwealth power, but it was really about admitting Aboriginal people to equal citizenship. It was a plea for equality from people who had been subjected to a complete denial of their civil liberties across Australia. And it was a very easy thing for the Australian people to link in with. Everything that's happened since, land rights, native title, has been about the recognition of Aboriginal people and their collectives as an ongoing part of Australia. And this referendum is about a quite different thing from the 67 referendum. It's about the fact that historically the Aboriginal people have been here as peoples. They've continued to maintain their identity, and they will into the future. And that's something that our Constitution has up till now ignored. And I think that's completely wrong, and we'll be a more complete country when we recognise the continuing existence of Aboriginal peoples of the sort we are sharing country with today. The Yolngu, in my area, the Noongars, these are a continuing part of Australia, and the Constitution pretends they're not.
Can I thank you all for the opportunity of the panel being here and able to talk to you about some of the issues you raised. Many of you didn't get the opportunity of asking questions, but please do approach panel members. So thank you to the panel members, and once again, let's thank them.